The invitation was sitting on my kitchen counter when my son called to tell me she was pregnant. I remember standing there with my coffee going cold, looking at the thick cream envelope with the gold lettering, his name and hers together, and thinking, something is wrong. Not the kind of wrong you can explain to anyone. Just the low hum of it, the way you feel a storm before the sky does anything. My son's name is Harlan. He's 34. Looks like his mother did at that age. Same jaw, same way of going quiet when he's uncomfortable. His mother passed 11 years ago, ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to gone. After that, it was just the two of us, and I won't pretend I handled it well at first. I didn't. But we found our way back to each other, the way fathers and sons sometimes do when there's no one else left. He met her in February. By April, he was telling me she was the one. By June, there was a ring. Her name is Deirdre. I want to be fair about this. I want to say that when I first met her, I tried. I genuinely tried. She was beautiful in the way that fills a room before she even speaks. Dark hair, sharp eyes, a smile that arrived a half second before the warmth did. She asked good questions at dinner. She laughed at the right moments. She touched my son's arm the way a woman does, when she's staking a claim rather than expressing affection. But I told myself I was reading too much into it. I told myself I was a 63-year-old widower who'd been alone too long and didn't know what love looked like anymore. The first dinner she came to my house, she walked through every room. I have a nice house. I'm not going to be modest about it. I spent 30 years building a commercial flooring business from nothing, and I've been comfortable for a long time. Nothing ostentatious. 4 bedrooms, a decent kitchen, about 2 acres outside Raleigh. I worked for it, every square foot. She moved through the living room touching things, the edge of the fireplace mantel, the frame of the watercolor my wife chose in 1997. She paused at the window that looks out over the back property and said, "This is a lot of space for one person." It wasn't a question. I said, "I've been here a long time." She smiled. "Harlan says you might think about downsizing at some point." Harlan was in the kitchen. I'd asked him to open the wine. He hadn't said anything like that to me, not ever, but I let it go. Over dinner, she asked what I estimated the property was worth. She called it estimated. I said I didn't think about it that way, that it was my home, not an asset. She nodded like I'd said something quaint. I went to bed that night with the low hum louder than before. She became pregnant, or told us she had. Around the same time, Harlan started talking about the wedding venue. The Umstead. It's a hotel and spa in Cary. Beautiful property, not cheap. I wasn't against it. I told my son I'd contribute to the wedding costs the way a father should, within reason. What I didn't expect was the spreadsheet. She emailed it to me, itemized. Flowers, catering, photography, videography, rehearsal dinner, honeymoon in Tuscany. The total at the bottom was a number I had to read twice. She'd also included a line item labeled Housing Transition Assistance, $40,000, with a note that said they were hoping to be in a home of their own before the baby came, and that given the current market, a gift toward a down payment would help them get established. I called Harlan. I said, "Did you see this email?" He said, "She just wants us all to be on the same page." Harlan, this is not a conversation a person has over email. He got quiet in that way of his. "Dad, I know it's a lot, but she's carrying your grandchild and she just wants to feel secure. Is that so hard to understand?" I understood it fine. I understood something else too. I hired a private investigator the following Monday. I'm not going to dress that up or apologize for it. I'm a businessman. When something doesn't add up, you check the numbers. What he found in 3 weeks was more than I expected and less than I hoped. Deirdre had been engaged before, twice. The first time, outside of Charlotte, to a man in his late 50s who owned 3 car dealerships. That engagement ended 18 months, and after he discovered she'd been listed as a co-signer on a home equity line of credit he hadn't authorized. The dispute went to civil court. She settled. He didn't press criminal charges because he said he just wanted her gone. The second engagement was in Virginia, a retired physician. That one lasted 8 months. He declined to be interviewed, but court records showed a judgment against her for approximately $22,000 in disputed funds. She was 31 years old. I sat with that information for 4 days. I thought about how to tell my son. I thought about what he would say, what she would say, how it would go. I knew he was in love. I knew he believed in this baby. I knew that whatever I said would become the thing he held against me if the relationship survived, and I knew that if I said nothing and it didn't, he might never forgive me for that either. I decided not to say anything yet. Not until I had something he couldn't argue with. I started keeping notes. Dates, things she said, amounts mentioned. I bought a small digital recorder, the kind that clips to a shirt pocket, and I charged it every night. I want to be clear. I wasn't looking for a weapon. I was looking for the truth. There is a difference. The wedding was the set Saturday of October. The Umstead was exactly as beautiful as it looks on their website. Low lighting, cream and champagne everywhere, the smell of gardenias. My son stood at the end of the aisle and looked like his heart was going to come out of his chest. And I thought, if I'm wrong about her, I'll take it to my grave. I found my seat. I smiled at people. I kept my hands still. She came to find me during the cocktail hour, 40 minutes before the ceremony. The guests were drifting around the garden, music playing softly. She appeared at my elbow the way a person does when they've been waiting for their moment, and she said, "Can we step inside for a second? Just us." We went into a small anteroom off the main hall. She closed the door. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I know you had me investigated." I didn't say anything. She said, "I know about the PI. I know you know about Greensboro and about Richmond." She paused. "I need you to understand something. I am carrying your son's baby. I am going to be your daughter-in-law in about 40 minutes, and I would really hate for any of what you found to come up tonight or any other night." She let that sit. Then, "If you're willing to move forward like a family, get us that down payment, make it a wedding gift, put it in writing, then this stays between us. If you're not, then I think the baby's paternity becomes a very interesting question, and I think your son might find some of our conversations very upsetting." She smiled. The same smile from the first dinner. "Think about it. You have 35 minutes. She left. I stood in that anteroom for about 30 seconds. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pressed stop on the recorder. I had been carrying it since I got dressed that morning. Not because I knew this would happen. I want to be honest about that. I carried it because the hum had become something else by then, something that told me to be ready. I walked back out to the garden. I got a glass of water. I found my son near the hedgerow talking to one of his college friends, and I touched his arm and said, "I need 5 minutes before the ceremony. Just you and me." He looked at me and knew something was wrong immediately. He pulled me to the side. I said, "I love you. Everything I'm about to do, I am doing because I love you, and because your mother would have done the same thing." He said, "Dad, what is going on?" I played him the recording. I watched his face. I won't describe it in detail because it's not mine to share. What I will say is that he stood very still and listened to the whole thing, and when it was finished he asked me to play the last 30 seconds again. Then he asked me about Greensboro and Richmond. I told him what I knew. He asked to see the investigator's report. I had it on my phone. He read for a long time. The guests were being called inside. My son said, "Is she pregnant?" I said, "I don't know. I genuinely don't know." He nodded. He straightened his jacket. He said, "Okay. Okay." He walked inside. I followed. What happened next, I have to say, even now, even knowing how things turned out, was the hardest thing I've ever watched. Harder than I expected. My son walked to the front of the room and asked for everyone's attention. He said he needed to say something before they began. The room went quiet in that particular way a room goes quiet when something is wrong. He said, "There are some things I've just learned about the person I was about to marry, and I need to take some time before I can continue. I'm sorry to everyone who came. Please enjoy the reception. The food and bar will be open. I'm going to need a few minutes." He looked at her when he said it. She was already looking at him. She turned and walked out. She didn't make a scene. That surprised me. Maybe she'd always had an exit plan. I don't know. She was gone before most people understood what had happened. The room was very quiet for a long moment, and then it wasn't, and then it was chaos in the gentle sense. People murmuring, moving, my son's friends surrounding him. I sat down. I am 63 years old, and I sat down in a chair at my son's canceled wedding, and I thought about my wife and how she always said that you don't protect the people you love by looking away. You protect them by staying awake. I stayed awake. The following months were not easy. My son did not speak to me for 6 weeks. That was hard, harder than I showed anyone. I called and left messages. I didn't push. I understood. When you love someone the way he loved her, Finding out the truth doesn't make it hurt less. It just changes the shape of it. When he finally came over, it was a Sunday in December. Showed up at the door without calling. He sat at my kitchen table and didn't say much for a while. Then he asked if I'd checked whether the pregnancy was real. I said I'd looked into it. I said the PI had spoken to her former OB in Charlotte, who could confirm there had been no prenatal care established in our county under her name or the name she'd used before. He said, "So it was a lie?" I said, "I believe so." He sat with that. He said, "Dad, why didn't you tell me sooner, when you first hired someone?" And that's the question I've asked myself too. The honest answer is that I was afraid. Afraid he'd choose her. Afraid I'd be the villain in the story if I was wrong, and that even if I was right, I'd be the villain for a while anyway. I told him that. I didn't dress it up. He said, "You should have told me." I said, "Yes, I should have." That was true. I had tried to handle it alone when I should have trusted him with what I was finding. He was 34 years old, not 14. He deserved the chance to make his own choice with the real information in front of him. I did him a disservice by waiting, even though I thought I was protecting him. It's the difference between shielding someone and deciding for them. I learned that the hard way. Her number had been disconnected. She had moved out of her apartment. The civil matter, her fraudulent co-signing from the Charlotte engagement, had never been fully resolved, and my attorney contacted the original plaintiff to ask whether he wanted to revisit it. He did. The combined records from his case and the report from the Richmond judgment were sufficient for law enforcement to open a fraud investigation. That's still ongoing. I don't know where she is. My son is doing better. He's been seeing a counselor, which was his idea, and I think it's helping. He comes over for dinner on Sundays now. He grills. He is quieter than he used to be, but there's something steadier in him too, like he went through something hard and came out knowing himself better. I recognize that. His mother had it. I turned 64 in January. My son made a cake, lemon, her recipe, and we ate it at the kitchen table. He asked me at some point what I would do differently if I could go back. I said I would have sat him down the first week and told him what I was seeing. I would have said, "I notice things that concern me. I could be wrong. But you deserve to know what I'm noticing." He said, "I might have been furious with you." I said, "I know." He said, "I probably would have chosen her anyway, at least for a while." I said, "Maybe, but that would have been your choice to make, not mine." He thought about that. He said, "I think she would have taken everything." I said, "Probably." He said, "Thank you." I didn't say anything. I poured us both more coffee. Outside it was dark and cold, and the property looked the same as it always has. 2 acres, bare trees in January, the same view his mother used to watch from that window. Some things you hold on to, not because they're worth money, but because they're worth everything else.